The humid air of JFK Airport clung to David's skin as he boarded his cross-country flight to Los Angeles. A seasoned business traveler in his late 40s, David knew the drill. Find his seat, stash his carry-on, and settle in for 5 hours of work or quiet reflection. He located his window seat, 14A, and slid in, already reaching for his noise-canceling headphones. A young woman no older than 18 was already occupying the middle seat, 14B. She was meticulously arranging a small worn backpack at her feet, her movement stiff and jerky. Her knuckles were white where they gripped the armrests, and her eyes, wide and darting, scanned every inch of the cabin. She wore a simple, dark hoodie, pulled slightly forward, as if to shield her from the world. David offered a polite nod, but she didn't seem to notice. Her breathing was shallow, almost panting, and a fine sheen of sweat coated her forehead despite the cool cabin air. As the cabin door closed with a definitive thud, she flinched, a quiet gasp escaping her lips. "First flight?" David asked, his voice low and gentle, observing her obvious distress. She turned to him, her eyes a striking hazel, filled with a raw, undeniable fear. "Is it that obvious?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "Yeah, my very first one." She swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the small window. "Nothing to be ashamed of," David reassured her, a warm, genuine smile creasing his eyes. "Lots of people get nervous. I used to, a long time ago." He paused, giving her a moment. "My name's David, by the way." "Sarah," she managed, her voice still trembling. It's so big and fast. And what if it breaks?" "David," chuckled softly, trying to lighten the mood. "Statistically, you're safer up here than you are driving to the airport. Think of it as a really fast, really high bus." He noticed her hands were still clutching the armrests so tightly her nails were almost digging into the plastic. Turbulence is normal, just like bumps in the road. And those noises? Just the plane doing its job. As the aircraft began to taxi, the gentle vibrations intensified and Sarah's breathing became more erratic. She squeezed her eyes shut, a small, desperate whimper escaping. David, remembering how his own daughter used to get anxious, leaned slightly closer. "Hey, look at me for a second, Sarah," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. She slowly opened her eyes, her gaze unfocused. "Try this. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts. Hold it for 4. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth for 4. "Okay?" She nodded, her eyes still wide. David demonstrated, taking exaggerated, slow breaths. Sarah tried to follow, her breath still catching. But a tiny flicker of focus returned to her eyes. The plane turned onto the runway, the roar of the engines building to a deafening crescendo. Sarah gasped, burying her face slightly into her hoodie. David didn't press her. He just kept breathing slowly, conspicuously, hoping she'd mirror him. As the aircraft surged forward, picking up incredible speed, he gently placed his hand on the armrest between them, not touching her but offering a silent, steady presence. The moment of liftoff was accompanied by a visceral jolt, and Sarah's small body stiffened beside him. The ascent was gradual but relentless. Sarah kept her eyes tightly shut, her grip on the armrests unwavering. David maintained a steady, reassuring presence beside her. He continued his slow, even breathing, and after a few minutes, he noticed Sarah's breaths, though still shallow, were beginning to sync with his. Once the plane leveled off and the "Fasten Seatbelt" sign extinguished, the flight attendant began her service. Sarah still hadn't moved. "We're level now, Sarah," David said softly. "The hardest part is over. You did great." Slowly, tentatively, she opened her eyes. She looked out the window, her gaze sweeping over the vast expanse of clouds, a surreal blanket stretching to the horizon. A flicker of awe mixed with residual fear crossed her face. It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice still a little shaky. "It is," David agreed. Sometimes just looking at something vast helps you feel a little less trapped. He offered her a small packaged cookie from his travel bag. Want one? Airport food is usually a gamble, but these rarely disappoint. Sarah managed a weak smile and took the cookie. The simple act of eating seemed to ground her. As the flight progressed, David gently engaged her in conversation, avoiding anything that might trigger her anxiety. He asked about her interests, her favorite books, what she planned to do in Los Angeles. She revealed she was visiting family, her responses becoming a little more confident with each passing minute. She talked about her love for abstract art and her dreams of opening a small gallery someday. David, a software engineer by trade, found himself genuinely captivated by her artistic passion. So, what made you decide to fly now, if you've always avoided it? David asked, careful with his tone. Sarah hesitated, looking out the window. My dad, she began, her voice softening. He travels a lot, and he always tries to get me to visit. I just couldn't. But something came up, and I needed to be there. He really encouraged me to face it. He said he'd meet me right at the gate. There was a hint of admiration, almost reverence in her voice when she spoke of her father. Just then, the plane hit a patch of unexpected turbulence. The cabin shuddered violently, and the overhead bins rattled. Sarah gasped, her eyes snapping shut again, her hand instinctively reaching out. David's hand was already there, gently but firmly covering hers on the armrest. It's okay, Sarah, he said, his voice calm and steady. Just a few bumps. The pilot's got us. Breathe with me. In, out. He kept his hand there, a warm, reassuring anchor. Sarah squeezed her eyes tighter, but she continued to breathe, her fear slowly ebbing. As the turbulence subsided, David kept talking, gently distracting her, pointing out landmarks below when the clouds parted, sharing funny anecdotes about his own travel mishaps. He noticed that the subtle pressure of his hand on hers, a simple, non-invasive gesture, seemed to work wonders. By the time the descent began, Sarah was still nervous, but the raw terror had been replaced by a manageable apprehension. She even managed a small laugh when David joked about how her ears would pop. As the plane began its final approach into Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, the sun, now low in the western sky, cast a golden hue over the sprawling city. Sarah, though still clutching the armrests, was visibly calmer. She was even glancing out the window, pointing out familiar landmarks she recognized from photos. That's the Santa Monica Pier, she exclaimed, a genuine smile on her face. My cousin lives near there. David smiled, pleased by her transformation. Almost there, Sarah, you did it. Conquered the skies on your first try. She looked at him, her hazel eyes glistening. I couldn't have done it without you, David, seriously. Thank you for everything. Her sincerity was palpable. The aircraft touched down with a gentle bump, and the cabin erupted in the usual polite applause. Sarah let out a long, shaky breath, a mixture of relief and disbelief on her face. We're here, she whispered, as if speaking to herself. As the plane taxied towards the gate, David gathered his belongings, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Helping Sarah had been a welcome distraction from his own work, a reminder of the simple power of human connection. He rarely spoke to strangers on flights, but this time he was glad he had. Once the plane pulled up to the jet bridge and the seatbelt sign turned off, the usual rush of passengers began. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, her eyes still scanning the small oval window of the door. My dad said he'd be right here, she murmured, a nervous excitement in her voice. Just as the flight attendant opened the aircraft door, a figure immediately stepped onto the jet bridge. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed with a stern, intelligent face that was instantly recognizable. He held a small bouquet of white roses. His presence commanded attention even before he spoke. A ripple went through the flight attendants, a subtle shift in their posture, a heightened awareness. He didn't look like an ordinary airport greeter. He looked like someone who had bypassed all protocol to be the first one there. Sarah. The man's voice boomed, a deep, resonant tone that carried a surprising warmth. He moved quickly, his eyes fixed on the young woman. Sarah's face lit up, a radiant smile replacing her earlier apprehension. "Dad!" She rushed towards him, embracing him tightly. David watched the exchange, a strange sense of déjà vu. The man's face, it was so familiar. He'd seen it on magazine covers, in financial news headlines, in documentaries. The reclusive tech entrepreneur, CEO of a revolutionary AI company known for his relentless pursuit of innovation and his fierce protection of his privacy. Elias Thorne, the one and only Elias Thorne, a man whose net worth was measured in billions, and whose name graced the covers of tech magazines worldwide, held his daughter in a tight embrace on the jet bridge. He pulled back, his hand cupping her cheek, his stern features softened by paternal relief. "You're okay," he murmured, his eyes scanning her face for any lingering sign of distress. "How was it? Did you manage?" Sarah, still beaming, shook her head slightly. "Dad, it was intense, but I had help. So much help." She turned, her gaze immediately finding David, who was standing a few feet away, holding his carry-on, a look of stunned recognition on his face. Elias Thorne followed her gaze. His eyes, sharp and assessing, met David's. There was no publicist, no security detail, just a father's quiet gratitude in his expression. "This is David," Sarah said, pulling away from her father slightly and gesturing towards David. "He sat next to me. He helped me through the whole thing, the turbulence, the takeoff, everything. He was amazing." Elias Thorne's formidable gaze softened further as he stepped towards David, extending a hand. "David," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being in charge, but now tinged with genuine warmth. "Elias Thorne, thank you. My daughter has always been incredibly anxious about flying. This was a huge step for her and for you to be there. It means more than you know." David, still slightly awestruck by the sudden revelation, shook Thorne's hand. The grip was firm, sincere. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Thorne. Sarah was incredibly brave. It's truly impressive for a first flight." "She is," Thorne agreed, a proud smile on his face as he looked at Sarah. "She told me she was nervous, but I had no idea of the extent of her anxiety. It takes a remarkable person to offer that kind of support to a stranger." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "I'm always so focused on the next big thing, the next innovation. Sometimes I forget the simple human connections that truly matter. You reminded me." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes bright. "He told me about breathing exercises, and he kept me talking, Dad. He even made me laugh." Elias Thorne nodded, his attention fully on David. "If you ever find yourself in need of anything, David, please don't hesitate to reach out. I mean that." He subtly handed David a small, embossed card. It wasn't a business card, but a personal contact with a single phone number and an email address. "Consider it a standing offer of gratitude." David took the card, feeling the smooth, heavy stock in his hand. He wasn't looking for a reward, but the sincerity of the gesture, especially from a man of Thorne's stature, was profoundly moving. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. That's very kind." As they began to walk off the jet bridge and into the bustling terminal, Elias Thorne kept a protective arm around Sarah, occasionally glancing back at David with a look of genuine appreciation. Sarah waved at David over her father's shoulder, a wide, confident smile on her face. David watched them go, the bustling crowds of LAX swirling around him. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had helped a nervous teen conquer a significant fear, and in doing so, he had unexpectedly crossed paths with a world he rarely encountered. He pulled out his phone, the contact card from Elias Thorne, still clutched in his other hand. He didn't know if he'd ever use it, but it was a tangible reminder of a moment when simple kindness had forged an unlikely connection. He walked towards baggage claim, the hum of the airport no longer just background noise, but a symphony of countless individual journeys, each with their own fears, triumphs, and unexpected moments of human connection. He realized that day that some of the most impactful stories weren't found in headlines or boardrooms, but in the quiet shared spaces between strangers.